now that the roll has been called, Mike, do you have a report?
Well, it's because this is a special meeting that was called really for just one purpose. We can just move right into the main purpose of the meeting, which I'll briefly summarize how we got here today. Since about mid-December of 2015, the authority has been focused on a number of issues related to the concession agreement with the Suez KKR joint venture. There were three really main areas of focus in connection with that concession agreement that the authority has been working on since December. One is understanding the ramification of the SRBC, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission permitting issue, and the potential impact to Middletown ratepayers of the loss of grandfather status of 4 of the wells in the event that the authority would be terminated. The second issue that we spent a lot of time on, obviously, is getting an understanding under the concession agreement about the extent of PUC jurisdiction over the concession and the authority and its operations because of the service to customers outside of the Middletown Borough limits. And the third area, most recently, that a lot of focus has been applied to is the concessionaire's 5-year CapEx plan, Capital Expenditure plan. Under the concession agreement, the concessionaire is to submit a 5-year capital expenditure plan. They did that back in February, and under the concession agreement, the authority has the obligation to review and either approve or withhold approval of that plan. As you know, to that end, you retained Arrow Consulting, Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Naus, to do a detailed analysis of the 5-year CapEx plan. During the special meeting last month, Arrow indicated that while the concessionaire had been very forthcoming with information about the 5-year CapEx plan, they still needed some additional information about the plan, some additional clarifications about the plan. And so at that time, the authority board voted to withhold approval until that additional information could be reviewed. I believe Mr. Kaufman's going to report that additional information has been provided and reviewed. And so the purpose today, of today's meeting, is for Arrow to present their recommendations on the concessionaire's 5-year capital expenditure plan. So that's a brief summary of all of the activity of the authority over the past couple of months for your consideration. And then, after, if you want to discuss this at all, then you turn it over to Arrow to present their recommendation.
And the only thing I have is the authorities are taking these efforts because there was no indication that the borough was willing to take the necessary steps to adequately represent and protect Middletown ratepayers. And if you enter your name and then go into your report, please.
Sure. My name is Terry Kaufman. I'm Vice President of Arrow Consulting, and I'm also the officer in charge of this project. Just a nickel's worth of a tour about Arrow. We're about 60 years old. For some of you who've been in the area, we're actually the employee-owned following what used to be youth engineers out of Lancaster many years ago. We represent in the neighborhood of 200 municipal clients who do a lot of work within the water and sewer area. Project manager of this project is Michael Naus. Mike had a scheduling conflict, so I'd kind of like to give you a nickel's worth of a tour. I don't want to bore you with details of everything that's here, because it's such fun. It really is something everyone should read at least once in their life, maybe. Under the lease agreement, Suez is required to submit a 5-year capital expenditure plan for water and wastewater. The authority is obligated, as you said, Mr. Chairman, to review the 5-year plan and either approve or withhold approval. On the lease agreement, the 5-year plans include 2 categories of expenditures: capital expenditures and major capital improvements. After receiving the 5-year plan, the authority directs its professional consultants, i.e. Arrow and Stevens Lee, to analyze the plan to protect ratepayers' interests. We evaluate that only authorized projects were included in the plan and evaluate the proposed costs of the project were reasonable evaluate that only eligible projects were categorized as major capital improvements. And I just want to go a little bit of the language in it on the concession lease agreement, the Middletown water and wastewater system, the concessionaire and the operator Suez submitted the first 5-year plan February 26th. A copy of the plan submission is located in Exhibit A, and we have that here.
I'll pass on these members to the.
Sure.
This is the ERA's memorandum with their recommendations on the CapEx plan, and that's what Mr. Coffman's.
In accordance with the obligations under the agreement, its goals of protecting ratepayers, the authority engaged us to look at this. Summary of the 5-year CapEx submitted by Suez actually had 7, or you could read them perhaps as 8 items in the budget. After being directed again by the authority, we did speak to Suez on several occasions, and I could provide a listing, but probably those contacts and cross contacts involved 10 to 12 touches.
The summary of the CapEx plan is on page 2 of the memo, and that's what Terry was referring to.
Right, on page 2 of 5 is a summary of the projects that were included. The evaluation of the major capital improvements. Any capital improvement required to increase the treatment capacity of the wastewater utility system, any amount required to fund a casualty cost in excess of net insurance proceeds, any capital improvement to the utility system have an estimated cost in excess of $500,000 in the written opinion of an engineering firm constitutes an expansion or renewal or replacement or betterment as use of at least 5 years. Capital improvements to utility system may be aggregated and treated as a single capital improvement in accordance with the terms of the agreement. If they involve water or sewer main replacement, or if the improvements are close in geographic proximity and are reasonably related to each other from an engineering efficiency and functional perspective. And that is something we evaluate very closely on some of the bundle items that were presented. Impacts of major capital improvements, and I want to stress this a little bit. It's critical for the authority to analyze the 5-year plan and determine whether Suez appropriately categorizing costs as major capital improvements. This is because Suez has the right to impose a capital cost recovery charge of ratepayers starting in 2017. The capital cost recovery charge is based on the total cost of major capital improvements, including debt service, for the full useful life of those major capital improvements. So if you put an infrastructure water line in at $2 million and it has a useful life determined by an engineer of 30 years, that payment plan will be on 30 years with a 3% interest rate calculating. And I'll sort of show how that may play out as we go forward. The capital cost recovery charge calculated for annual major capital improvements is calculated based upon actual expenditure for each project. The annual charge is then applied to the useful life of each project. Ultimately, this means that capital cost recovery charges are aggregated at such time that the useful life for a particular project has been used. Conclusion regarding qualifications, that's on page 4. Power based upon the additional information furnished by Suez concludes that not all the projects submitted in the 5-year CapEx plan qualify as major capital improvement under the clear definition provided in the concession agreement. It's the professional opinion of ARA that the following, with the additional submission of a written opinion of an engineering firm. And again, that was one thing that was not included, and there was some discussion that the submission should include an engineer's cost, but we are comfortable those numbers can be ascertained by Suez at some point. In accordance with major capital improvement plans by Suez would qualify the underground infrastructure, the water main replacement, and storage tank painting. And again, we can go through according to section 4.1, 5-year CapEx plan should include the major capital improvements and any other capital improvements that are necessary for performance. The results of the presentation finally were the underground infrastructure, the water main replacement, storage tanks are the remainder of the projects proposed in the 5-year plan, infrastructure renewals, sewer main, wastewater treatment bundle, EMU Road, and the interconnection project do not qualify as major capital improvements under the agreement for the reasons explained in Exhibit C. Based upon this determination, the ratepayers would realize a significant savings in the annual capital cost recovery charge. These savings are summarized, in essence, based on that. And again, it was based on what the concessionaire's agreement with Middletown said should happen. It reduces the amount of cost that will be passed on to the ratepayers of $3.284.2 million on page 5 of 5. If in fact you take that number and play it out, again, the agreement showed that the rate for the sewer and water remained the same, but there was an increase possible for major capital X recovery charges. For example, in 2017, we estimated it would be about $9 a month, and based on this figure, it would stretch out to about $28 a month by year 2021. That's on top of what you're currently paying for water and sewer. Again, we're not criticizing the work that's being done. We're doing the pure analysis of what's in the concessionaire's agreement, that it says that may be reimbursed for major CapEx projects. So our view is that those two items that we recommended should be approved, or could be approved, provided we have an engineer's opinion. It was conveyed to Suez, I believe, on April 16th. I believe it's fair to say they didn't agree with that. We asked them to provide additional information. As of today, we have received no additional information. I can answer questions if the board has any.
Rob, do you have any questions? David?
Well, just a couple of things. Now, the calculations that you've done, showing the difference between what they presented as opposed to what you presented, that results in a 3-point-something million savings. It's really not, I wouldn't call it savings, it will be less cost. Was this based on what Suez is telling us needs to be done, or is it based on an independent study?
This is on the list that they're presented based on the agreement and also some additional work projects. And there's a mix of those. Some were part of the agreement, some were.
So we don't.
I think I'll take a shot at answering your question.
Yeah.
If you look at page number 2, maybe, that is the 5-year CapEx plan that Suez proposed.
Right.
Those are all the projects they proposed to do and the cost for 5 years. I think Arrow is saying that all of those costs are reasonable.
Yeah.
All of those projects are worthwhile to do. And I don't think they have a problem with any of them. What their problem is, or what their issue is whether or not those projects meet the definition of major capital improvement under the concession agreement.
The major capital improvements allow the concessionaire to seek approval to increase rates for those items. The other major, the capital improvements are something that would be normally viewed as operational and should be taken care of. And the one that comes to my mind were additional lights or energy efficient lighting. We don't necessarily disagree that that's bad, but our view is if you're putting additional lighting and or energy efficient lighting, all you're really reducing is the operating cost, which ultimately does not benefit the ratepayers, ultimately benefits the concessionaire. That's the simpler one I can look at.
But what I'm looking at is, all right, so the amount that's presented, let's say for 2016,
Right.
I'm looking for verification that this is actually an amount that needs to be done in that particular year, as an example. You follow what I'm getting to now?
I will speak to what I believe our folks felt, that there was nothing in the plan that would, are you talking about all the projects or the major CapEx projects?
Yeah, so I'm looking, for instance, water mains. This much has to be done. But I want to see the reason why this much has to be done. That's what I'm getting to. From an engineering
We looked at most of those items that were included, and they were reasonable, and they were what we felt were not items that should be major capital X improvements. It could have been such things as a motor to put on the shelf on an item. The underground water line, I don't think there's any question that was necessary and needed. Water, storage tank paving, I don't think there's any question that needs to be done in that. And those are the items that we really drilled down on, the major CapEx project, which would in essence provide an additional cost to your ratepayers beyond what the rates that they're guaranteed by the agreement. So if the concessionaire chooses to do some of those lighting improvements and chooses to do some of the others, that's okay, but it should be on their dime and not necessarily the ratepayers' dime. Right? Does that make sense?
Well, on top of page 4, the conclusion regarding the cost, arrow, and it was Mike now, so let me get it.
Mike,
He said, based on the additional information furnished by Suez, the costs submitted in the 5-year CapEx plan are reasonable and consistent with industry practice and the concession agreement. So, Arrow is saying that all of these costs are appropriate to be spent every year for the 5 years to operate and to upgrade the system.
The only place we had a concern with those items were delegated as major capital versus what we would just say capital.
Right, it's really a definitional thing. Do the concessionaire believe that every single one of the line items should be categorized as a major capital improvement? Arrow is saying that only the water main replacement and the storage tank, which are the two biggest projects by far, should be categorized as major capital improvements, and that the other ones do not meet the definition of major capital improvements under the agreement.
I'll tell you where my concern comes from. Everything that's happened the last, at least the last year and something, basically has resulted in a significant increase in the taxpayers paying bills just for this. And then on top of that, now we're saying, okay, this much we're going to add, and it's really a rate increase, not a one-time payment.
It will be a cost to the ratepayers for the duration of the improvement. And again, make an assumption the water line is 30 years, make an assumption the water tank is 10 or 15 years. But that will be a cost. And then you realize in the next 5-year plan, you will probably have some additional items that will add onto the list before some of these actually leave now. So what you project is potentially $28 a month in 2021 could end up being significant in 2026. But again, there is an agreement we have to look at based on what they are allowed to do. And again, I don't think we questioned anyone that they had in based on the agreement. But what we didn't believe is that $3.3 million qualifies as major CapEx, which would in cost directly impact the ratepayers now. And subsequent years. But it is reasonable based on the concession agreement.
Jim, questions? Amy?
That is all valid questions, and they are concerned. There are a lot of issues at play, and as you try to evaluate it, we tried to be fair to the concessionaire, but we also tried to be absolutely according to the agreement to protect the ratepayers.
Yeah, if you look at Exhibit C, Mike Now, Sonera went through project by project, every single one, and broke down the need for the items and the reasonableness of the cost.
As an example, the art class study cost $40,000,
Which one are you looking at?
2016.
I'm sorry, which item was that for?
Art class study. If you look at this, this long table right here.
Okay.
That's a different.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that. That might have been the original submission. So you're looking at the wastewater treatment plant bundle?
Right.
So this is a series of about a dozen different projects to occur in the wastewater treatment plant over the course of 2 years.
And we did not feel that they met the burden for the major CapEx project. And again, it's one of these that I had mentioned on here, replacing lighting, security cameras, fire alarms, a lab training building roof, biofilters that were just, there's one of them I think somewhere was about a study, the first phase. Again, they're reasonable in that you would want a raw water pump, an additional water pump there, but it really doesn't have, in our opinion, a major capital life expectancy. That pump is rather unique also because it is, I believe, a German pump, and it really has a long lead time. And again, I don't want to opine, but one has to reasonably wonder, would it make more sense to retrofit to a localized product that wouldn't need to be ordered 5-6 months ahead of time down here? But that wasn't our opinion. I mean, we just looked at it and said, we don't think that's a major capital product. A water pump wears out, that's part of the normal system.
And that is part of what would be the $3.2 million
Correct.
over the course of 5 years that you're saying is not.
Correct. We believe that should be, it's a capital cost, but it's not major capital, and it's more of an operational type cost.
If you change the light bulbs and the way they are, you don't have to put an extra set of lights in.
Well, and again, one of this theory was to add lights and change to LED, but if you really look at that, the only thing that gains there, you may get a little more lighting to reduce the electricity, which increases the profitability. Profit's not a bad term. We're just looking at the narrow focus of what the concession agreement says we do.
It's actually a pretty simple test under the agreement.
Yeah.
For something to be a major capital improvement, it basically has to be over $500,000 in cost. Okay? Now, there is a way, provision in here to bundle costs together to exceed that 500,000, but they have to be related to each other.
And that was one of the other issues, if you looked at wastewater treatment, if you look at those items, it was real hard to make an argument that most of those are somehow connected to each other.
Right.
So, I mean, so just looking at the CapEx plan, no doubt, the water main lines, every year is over $500,000. That's major CapEx. Storage tank painting, Aero Mike Now's agreed it was necessary, and those costs, believe it or not, that's what it costs to paint those storage tanks. It's well over $500,000. The rest don't meet that 500,000 threshold.
Yes, as Mike said, it's really kind of straightforward, whether you like it or not. The agreement's laid out of what is in and what is out.
So what I'm looking for is an explanation of why 2,200 million feet. Why not?
That's actually called for somewhere in the concession agreement, that they shall replace so many feet.
A year.
Yeah, if you look at
They're obligated, they're obligated to meet that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Now,
I actually think the concession says 2,500. And the 5-year CapEx plan is proposing 2,200 feet in 2016 because they actually exceeded it in 2015, I believe.
An average of 25.
Average of 2,500, right. So
And they
it's
did
not a
some
minimum of
additional work
2,500.
last year. Yeah.
probably not with our system, but down the road, is there a possibility that there could be a year or years where there would be no need for, not likely?
I'm not supposed to opine, but I would guess
Okay.
it's going to be quite a number of years, just based on the age of the system.
Yep.
And one of the things that Suez is doing is videoing it right now to do an analysis, but given the age of your infrastructure, it's going to be quite some time.
I mean, nothing's been done for 35 years, 54 years, 56 years.
It's been a while. It truly has been a while.
Welcome to everybody's.
Mr. Chairman, once the board is done with their questioning, I think you should open up for some public comment.
Yeah. This is a time for, yes, Tim?
One question I have for Terry. In the calculations and breaking down the numbers, did you actually come up with, based upon what was proposed, what that capital cost recovery would be under Suez's proposal? Like, how many dollars per month would the ratepayers have to pay based upon what they proposed?
We, I think, have done the, based on what we're recommending, actually, based on what's proposed, it could be beginning in 2017, $9 a month, and in 2021, $28 a month, in addition to the sewer rates.
So the capital cost recovery is between $9 and $28 a month.
Well, it begins at 9 and then it accrues each year. Like the second year takes in the first year and accumulates in the third year. And for example, water line, I'm going to assume that Suez will say 30 years. So that cost recovery will be on it for 30 years.
So the water pipe is going to cost maybe let's just throw a number out. That might be $5 a month. The water tank will be $6 a month. Each one of these projects will translate into X dollars per month.
Yes.
And the water pipe, if that's $5 a month, that water pipe will be $5 a month for every month for the next 30 years.
Yes.
Until that water.
Again, I using that analogy, I won't say it's $5, but using that analogy, whatever the cost allocation and asset time of it. Yes.
Yeah, I think, so you're getting at the capital cost recovery charge.
Yes.
That's what it's called, under the agreement. And only the major capital improvements translate into that cost recovery charge.
Only the major.
That's why it's so important now to define what's a major capital improvement and what's not. And to get your question about what's it going to be, I don't think Arrow's in a position to say what exactly it's going to be. There's too many variables. It's what's the final cost, what's the useful life, and how many accounts are being served, and I guess possibly even what's the total volume of sales of the system.
It really is different. I mean, these are guesstimates. I shouldn't say that's not true. Based on the submission, these are estimates. The truth is the construction costs may be less. They may be slightly more. Don't know. These are just reasonable projections, we believe. But again, if we extrapolated this out, as long as those water lines are being replaced for 30 years, that if you're using the number $5, $10, $50, $20, $30, it's substantial. That's a big nut.
So are you
You
saying,
address the chair, please.
all right, I want to make sure of what I heard. By 2021, you're expecting the cost to have inflated from what our bill now is to an additional $28. Is that what I'm hearing?
This gentleman said that, yes, Michelle, that there's a possibility that your bill at that point in time could go up that much.
And I can't see the reason.
Because Arrow is going to be making along the 5-year period as well as the next 30 to 50 years, improvements to the system.
Suez is going to
I'm sorry, Suez. Is that fair, Dan?
If that's your assertion, yes.
Okay,
Oh, am I wrong on that?
We have an obligation to make improvements to the system, yes.
And unfortunately, Rochelle, the system is as outdated and in need of a repair. And this lies the problem that Suez is having and the borough is having as far as the system. Because it hasn't been maintained like it should have been over the last 15, 20 years, or longer in some cases.
okay,
The
so,
water lines are actually mandated in the concession agreement, average of 2,500 feet throughout the life of the agreement, all 50 years. That is mandated that we do that. The sewer lines are also equated in there, but there's not a mandated footage per se. But sewer line replacement and repair is also capital improvement to the system.
Sure.
And therefore, that's why we added sewer line replacement / repair. A lot of the sewer lines are we've already identified. We did 20,000 foot of CCTV last year, and we will do another 20,000 foot this year, cleaning and video. And those lines, once we video them, we have a known problem. Then we have a time frame to take corrective action as per the concession agreement, which is major capital improvement.
Well, there's an issue that I heard here, and the one thing was, I heard you say profit, okay? Profit's not a good word to say in a borough when you've got elderly people on a fixed income, and you say $28, doesn't mean that they're gonna be able to afford that $28. So then what do when they get behind on their bill? You shut their water off. And now where are they gonna go? And this is a very good thing to think about, Dave. $28. Some people can't afford $28.
I'm very well aware of that, Michelle.
Well, then what do you do for them? How are you going to alleviate their issue? What are you going to do to comfort them so that they still can remain in their house and not have to worry about, oh, am I going to have to choose between paying my medicine, getting groceries, going to the doctor, or paying my water bill?
Well, how is that any different than the electric bill that the borough just raised a penny with their...
I say the same thing to them. I say the same thing to them.
As long as they have the trust fund money, we're getting off on a tangent here.
Well, yeah, we are.
But,
And that's apples and oranges here.
And this whole discussion is exactly why this authority has spent so much time and effort over the past 3 or 4 months with Arrow to really look over this CapEx plan to make sure there's not one penny more than is justified in it. This concession agreement was signed back in 2014.
Yes,
You may
I know.
remember. And this is the first time this CapEx plan has come up, because under the agreement, the 5-year plan was to be submitted in 2015.
Why wasn't
2016.
Why wasn't the CapEx plan submitted in 2015? So then you would know, by 2016, what was really going on.
There's some folks down the street that you might want to ask those questions to, and in the borough council.
And that's in the agreement, if I
Yes,
could
right.
respond to that, please.
Why
In the agreement, the first year of operation, we had to come up with the initial CapEx plan, which was mostly the water main replacement for 2015, which was completed on Ann Street.
okay.
In the agreement, it said by the end of February or April,
2016.
whatever it is, it was 60 days after the first anniversary, we had to do due diligence in 2015 to devise or come up with the 5-year CapEx plan, which was submitted. So that first year, we had to go through a lot of analysis to come up with a 5-year CapEx plan. And as you can see by the size of it and the complexity of it, there was a substantial amount of work that went into developing the 5-year CapEx plan. But we had that whole first year to develop that CapEx, that 5-year plan. The first year plan was essentially the first 2,500 feet, which was agreed upon, and that's in the concession agreement also.
Well, all right, am I of the correct understanding that you guys went before Judge Dowling, what, about 2 weeks ago?
Probably a little more than that now, but...
Okay, and my understanding is that you guys can't spend any money, the borough has to spend money. Is that correct?
Well, we are getting off on a tangent, but you're really confusing things here.
Okay, so...
This is not about the authority spending money. This is
Okay.
about the concessionaire.
Oh, so we're
spending-
talking about
They're
debt.
spending the $13 million.
Okay,
They're spending it. Now, to get to the point about litigation, it is interesting though the authority was trying to dig into this plan
Hmm,
because, again, Suez is spending the money, but they're gonna charge the residents to get that money back. Do you understand?
well, that sucks.
Right. These guys, the authority was evaluating it, and for some reason the borough moved to terminate the authority. That's a fact. So I'll let you fill in the gaps there about why that's happening, but that's a fact. The authority was reviewing the CapEx plan, the borough tried to terminate the authority.
Okay, and does that affect the Susquehanna River Basin?
That's a separate issue.
That's a separate issue.
But does that come into play at all, or it doesn't?
If I can, one of the reasons that the authority is in operation, in the fact that we did disband come January, was because of the Susquehanna River Basin Authority, because of the grandfathering of the wells. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, exactly.
And that's also why we brought Arrow on. Now, in the interim, then, Judge Downey made his ruling. The borough has since gone to the PUC, which is, in our opinion, possibly what they should have done to begin with, instead of going to Dauphin County for the court. And then we have since filed an appeal. So that's in Commonwealth Court. That hasn't, we have no idea when that's going to be. But with the borough going to the PUC, who knows what's going to happen there?
Yeah,
But
but
the
the,
reason why we're sitting here right now is because of the Susquehanna River Basin Authority and the wells and the grandfathering of the wells. But we're also, while we're here, we're also concerned with doing what is best for the ratepayers. And according to what the contract is, and according to what Arrow is giving us, it is looking like, over the span of the next 5 years, it would be best for the ratepayers. That although $10 million is, I wouldn't mind having that in my back pocket, but it's better than the $13 million that Arrow is, or Suez is recommending, which over the course of the next 5 years could possibly be a $3 million savings for the ratepayers.
so you're saying the possibility of Arrow making their recommendations versus Suez, we might want to jump on board with Arrow and kind of leave Suez out there?
No. Suez has got their obligation and responsibility according to the contract, which is what Arrow is saying is what they're recommending, that hopefully our council goes along with it as well. But what the authority is going to hopefully recommend is approving Arrow's recommendation, as opposed to what Suez is recommending. Am I correct, Mike?
Interesting.
Mike, you have any questions?
This increase, is this gonna be in lieu of what they would normally get as a cost of living increase? Or is it $28 a month, is there anything?
I don't think that you're getting a, till what, 19, or is it 17?
I don't know the day on it.
19.
19. Kind of rate increase.
That's when that kicks in.
Or could kick in.
Or could kick in. It's possible in 19 you would get a double whammy. You would get, if we follow Arrow's recommendation, 2.11 million, and according to the contract or whatever that might be, that Suez would then begin to get an annual, I believe, isn't it?
Is that according to inflation, or is that according to what?
That's according to the contract, Michelle.
So,
There
Dan,
is a formula in the contract that I cannot reiterate off the top of my head.
There is this document has a formula based on cost, flows, operations, of what that increase can or cannot be.
The formula is about gay ball.
Yeah.
Is that-
Dan, help us out here a little bit with this project that's going to occur out in Londonderry Township. Is there any benefit to that, to the Middletown ratepayers?
Well, of course, there's benefit to it. You're adding, ratepayer, that they'd be ratepayers just like Lower Soterra and Royalton are.
So there's a possibility that there could be some savings to the Middletown ratepayers. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's still in the infancy of.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's,
But yes, you're adding customers to the base,
right.
by percent.
And that's over a 20-year period? Is that still the
As
plan?
things get built out, mainly at Lytle Farms, but there's some additional flows that, from Lytle Farms that Londonderry would be adding to that. There's some flows for several trailer parks that are having issues with and everything else, but that's as the build out happens.
Do we have any idea as to when that might begin?
It depends on the development and at what rate the developers move at that. If you can predict that, then you should play the lottery.
And I don't play a lot of it. Yes, Mike?
When they do that, when they start out in Londonderry, that'd be considered a major capital expenditure. So they'd be able to build whatever they put in after, whether the houses are using it or not. All the ratepayers will pay for presently paying, but all the ones they put in, they're not gonna just run and stop with the thing. There's gonna be, cost savings involved to keep going. So where do we hit again for that? That'll be a major capital expenditure. They'll be able to start charging us for that even before it's done, so I don't know how that's a benefit to any ratepayer of Middletown.
That would be worked out in the agreement with Londonderry Township.
That's right.
Just much like it is if Lower Soterra does developments and anything else, that's based on the flows that come to us through one meter. So that's not a cost borne by the ratepayers, that is a cost borne by the developer as he expands.
There was a cost to Lower Soterra to the ratepayers of Middletown, as there was to Royalton. We never charged them enough to recoup what we were spending. It's always been Middletown, to pay this, to pay that, it's always been us. Thank you.
Yes, Michelle?
Now, Dan, when I was getting off the council, that was the issue that came up about Lytle Farm. Okay, my understanding then, and I cannot remember what the attorney's name was who approached me about that, is that the developer themselves were supposed to be the ones who would pay for all the wells and all the connections coming into Middletown. Now, I don't know if that's changed.
There's no wells involved with Londonderry.
But that was one of the things that they thought that they were gonna have to
Maybe
do.
back then.
Maybe, okay.
That is not within the jurisdictional boundaries. That is a franchised area of Pennsylvania American.
Okay,
And the water will not be going over to, no water will be served to Londonderry.
It's all sewer.
it's all sewer
All
then?
sewer.
Okay,
Don't confuse it, because that's how Londonderry ended up in court for 3 years.
yeah, with the Dairy Township?
It's actually Pennsylvania American Water, the court saying that's our franchise area, you're crossing into an area that you don't belong,
Right,
and that's been settled,
Good.
as far as I know.
Good.
That could, but as far as I know, that's gonna be that,
yeah,
nothing's done until it's done.
yeah, the original deal was it was supposed to be water and sewer at one point.
Yeah, and American Water got business lane pipeline down that way, and it's
Right.
been a couple thousand feet now, so
Right,
that's why water's,
and there was supposed to be a start of a well over there and a few other things that were supposed to be made illegal.
No,
Oh, okay, I just wondered.
this is a summary of the arrow analysis. I didn't put together. If anyone's interested in this.
Well, okay, if you're gonna go that way, then
thanks.
Oh, I thought you were gonna run out before you got.
No, we got you, we got you.
Okay.
So the top page is a summary of the arrow analysis compared to the Suez proposal. And the pages behind it are the key sections from the concession agreement that they followed in coming up with this recommendation. So as long as there's no more public comment, under the concession agreement, the authority has to approve or withhold approval within 30 days of receiving the 5-year CapEx plan. It was submitted originally back in February. At your March meeting, you withheld approval pending receipt of further information. That additional information was sent in early April. So now you're coming up against the 30-day deadline to, vote on your approval again. So that's the reason the special meeting was called. So it's up to the board of the authority now to vote to either approve or withhold approval for the 5-year plan.
All right, I'll make the motion to approve the concessionaire's 5-year CapEx plan, but subject to the condition that it be revised to clarify that the only items that qualify as major capital improvement are the water main replacement project and the storage tank painting project.
I second that.
There's a motion and there's a second. I have a question. What you're reading there and what we may be voting on, is that what Arrow has given us?
Yes.
You're shaking your head, okay.
That's those two items.
Yeah. Do you have any questions? Do you have any more questions?
I've got lots of concerns, but.
Well, we all have concerns. You're not the only one in that group. Do you have any more questions? Sue, call the roll, please.
Dave Grant,
Yes.
David Duque,
Yes.
Bob Lauer,
Yes.
Bob Lauer.
Pass 3-0. Thank you. Is there any old business?
I have one thing. It was requested by the financial people to find out what's going on with the Dole League check.
The who?
The Dole League check.
Is that the one for 95,000? You have.
When you say the financial people, do you mean Mark Morgan and his group? Okay.
Because they're bugging marking them for it.
Well,
Well,
again,
that was one of the issues that we had proposed to discuss with the borough, but we're not getting any
no, they haven't.
indication back.
They haven't had any reason to or want to sit down and talk with the authority about anything. So as far as, I guess, the board is concerned, until the borough sits down and talks to us, that $95,000 check was it?
That was a borough expense.
That was my understanding.
And again, we'd be happy, I think the authority would be happy to talk to them about it. We can put that in writing, I think, at some point, and we got no response.
Well, I had two letters sent to borough to sit down and talk with Ben Kappenstein, and went nowhere.
And the second thing is, we still have a meeting Wednesday.
Yes. Any new business?
Where's the meeting on, Wednesday? Right here. Same time?
Yep.
Same station?
Yep.
Same back channel?
Yep.
Same back.
Advertising, is it 6?
Seven.
Oh, it's advertising.
If there is nothing else, do I have someone's motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? So be it.
Come on.
Do you care to just next day or?
Well, you're not the only one.
Yeah, I know. You're right. Yes. Oh, yes. The memo from Arrow, full memo? I think so. I think that's, no, she wrote a copy of the full memo from Arrow. She asked me to provide a copy of the full memo, CapEx memo from Arrow.
Again, we're having
We can bring us a copy. I'll be here on Wednesday.